can see the slides changed. Is it visible? Can you see the changed slide?
The slides are visible, ma'am, but I'm not able to see the changes.
Okay, I'll reshare it. Can you check it? Is it visible now?
Ma'am, it is visible, ma'am.
So can you see the changed slides?
No, ma'am, the slides are not moving, ma'am.
Okay, I'll show it in regular mode then. Okay. Give me a moment. Yeah, I have shared my entire screen, so it might be visible now. So kindly let me know if it's visible now.
Yes, ma'am, it is visible and it is, the slides are also changing, ma'am.
Yes. So thank you so much, IoT, for giving me such a wonderful opportunity to interact with the curious minds, at the same time experts, especially teachers, who are very keen to understand the learner's psychology in the classroom. So let us begin with understanding the definition of how a learner's psychology should be in the classroom and why we must concern about it, first of all. According to Oxley in 2015, building positive learning relationships and intrinsically motivating children to learn are important for effective behavior management. Why this effective behavior management is important in class? Because learning and behavior has a close connection. Behavior is always influenced by various factors like stimuli, thereafter kind of motivation, intensity of acquisition, because all students are not same. They have various different mindsets. At the same time, they have different levels of adoption, levels of learning, such as you must be very aware about the concepts like slow learner and advanced learner. So their process and intensity of acquisition is different. At the same time, the level of adaptability. And this is why we have to be little concerned about the learner's psychology in the classroom. Before we move on to understand how is the learner's psychology in the classroom and what are the remedies to rectify and moderate those, let us first understand the basic of it. The basic of it is the principle of evolutionary psychology. Still, the human beings creation on the earth and the kind of human being, the way human being has evolved around through the centuries is something very noteworthy. And out of this process, out of the observations, what science, physics, and other sciences and humanities tell us, let us see. The human brain's function is to sort and process information, right? What does human's brain does exactly? It sorts out the information and processes it. How? According to the internal and external stimuli. Let us first understand what is stimuli. Stimuli is a kind of object or kind of product. There is a theory called classical conditioning that we will be discussing soon. So stimulus and response is a chain together. So stimulus is something, the kind of trigger or the kind of environment we provide to the learner is called as a stimuli. So our brain reacts according to the kind of stimuli the brain receives. The purpose of human brain is to process information, and in doing so, it produces reactive and proactive responses. Adaptive responses increase a human's chances of surviving long enough to pass on his or her genes and ensure the survival of his or her offspring. So adoption is a natural reaction of the brain. Human brain is made in such a way which is very adaptive to the kind of situation it is put in. So this adaptive response itself triggers the problem solving attitude. So whatever condition the human being is, the first reaction is how to sort out this problem, how to find out the remedies, because human brain naturally reacts because it is a survival tool. So survival instinct is there naturally into the human being. We have to understand this first. Second thing, the brain's problem solving centers evolved over hundreds and thousands of years of evolution. So the kind of problem solving technique or mechanism was there when was in a so-called monkey form, or the human being which is developed now after the technology and being in the uh, environment of technology and all, definitely has differences. This problem solving mechanism has progressed throughout the years, throughout the centuries, and it had taken hundreds and thousands years. This is what is called as mental processing. This mental processing occurs very unconsciously, and that is a kind of a very neutral process. And why does brain reacts in this way? Because survival is a very prominent instinct in the human being. Why we have to understand all these things? Because these are the dots which we have to link together as a teacher. Adaptability is very naturally available in all human beings, including the learners, right? Second thing, human brain reacts to the kind of stimuli that has been given. Stimuli, the kind of proportion given, kind of nutrition given, kind of food to the brain given, kind of atmosphere or the environment, learning environment given to the child. For example, let's say if there is a classroom where teacher is at the center, you must be aware about the inductive and deductive methods of teaching. So in deductive methods of teaching, which traditionally was happening, especially in traditional time in Gurukul system, the teacher was the controller of the class, and teacher used to teach through lecturing method, right? And students had very less chances of interrupting the sessions or exploring on their own. For example, old method of grammar translation method, let's say. So in grammar translation method, the grammar rules were first taught to the student, and then students used to imbibe those rules, and then they used to read a lot of examples, and then they used to apply those rules to the new examples given, and then they used to understand, learn grammar in that way. Whereas in the inductive method is very student-centric method, where students are at the center and the whole curricula is designed according to the students' needs, where students are given freedom and the role of teacher becomes that of the mentor or a facilitator or a guide. Wherever student needs a boost, proper stimuli, their teacher's role comes, and the teacher has to give a proper stimuli in order to grow in order for to nurture that child in a proper way, to give a correct direction to that child. So, first thing is a belief system in a person. Belief system is something that has to be worked on. Why? Because belief system, or let's say self-esteem, these are things which are which are the concerning parts, especially among the adolescent people, because they undergo a lot of complications, mental complications, because the kind of things they have been traditionally learning, reading, and if they happen to come across some very weird phenomena which is in contrast to their understanding, previous knowledge, or learning of the classroom, then they fall into a complication and their learning hampers. So this is something important. Let's say students' beliefs also about intelligence and ability always influence their cognitive functioning and learning. Cognitive is mental learning and functioning. Students who believe they are not good in schools struggle to learn because they always underestimate their powers. But this may be due to their mindset. Our beliefs about our own ability have a significant impact on how we perform. That is why here comes the teacher's role, who has a tremendous ability to assist students in learning by continuing to treat all students equally or as a capable learner. It is a duty of a teacher first not to be biased or give a biased treatment to the students. There will be slow learners to whom you may have to go for remedial classes. You may have to give different exercises, or might be you have to change your teaching patterns. There might be some advanced learners to whom you can give advanced studies. So in this way, you can help them boosting their belief system. Previous knowledge of a student is something that also hampers their learning. So a teacher must know the history of their learning. For example, if you are going to teach in class 2 mathematics, or let's say English language, then you must know if the child is well aware about the alphabets in English. So you can go for the further stage. At the same time, you may know that if the children in that classroom are able to write two-letter words or three-letter words, then accordingly you can give a kind of practice that can be given. So their previous knowledge is kind of foundation for their learning, and that is what is called also as a fundamental learning. And here comes a teacher's role, where a teacher has to understand the psychology of a student and has to study the previous knowledge level of a student before entering into the class, and a course or the station has to be designed accordingly. Erickson has given certain stages of development of a child, or let's say a learner, but not all students do fit in that levels. So a teacher must understand the stages of development might differ to certain children, and there might be certain reasons behind it. For example, certain child might be a slow learner, or some may have some mental trauma, due to which the child could not cope up with the fast going study, or the child may have a year's gap or educational gap. A child whose parents are educated, who are there at home to help the child, him or her, out for her studies, the development of that child is very different than the development of child which learns on his or her own. So you have to understand this very clearly. And according to that, you have to identify the learner's need and help them out in that particular sector. Generalization skills are kind of life skills for all of us, especially for students. Generalized learning is very important, but the thing is, it is very context based. So if the context is changed, the generalized learning does not help. So there, a teacher has to help students to learn how to generalize the results for the new skills. For example, if a child is well aware about a kind of experiment happening in the class, for example, when you mix two chemicals together, certain kind of reaction happens. Okay, this is a very generalized rule that a student know. So next time when a student is, for example, in first experiment, certain kind of vapor has come out. Okay, after mixing of the two chemicals, or mixing a chemical into water, it reacts in a different way. Let's say mixing the soda in lemon water, what would happen? It will create bubbles and spur out, but that may not happen when you put a salt in it, right? So those generalized skills may not help here, but what they can do, what a teacher can do better is to help students to reach to the results while learning the new skills. It basically means application based learning. Whatever they have learned from their previous theories or previous learnings, they have to learn applying to the new while acquiring the new skills. Thereafter, practice, drilling. This is another word for the practice. Repetition of certain things help in certain cases. So if somebody has needs to have a long term knowledge, such as tables of mathematics. Those tables cannot be mugged up by a student, cannot be remembered by any human being within one go. It needs a repetitive practice. So drilling helps in such cases. So a teacher has to identify where the drilling practices are necessary and their drilling practices has to be given. At the same time, for certain students, within a few attempts, they learn very quickly. Few students need more practice. So you have to identify such students, make separate groups, and then give kind of practices that you can give to them separately. So there will happen a kind of level in the learning. Otherwise, what would happen? There will always be difference. Feedback is something loved by all people of all ages. Especially for students, feedback plays a vital role motivation of learning. It is very critical to learning. So feedback is just never a grade or a couple of scribble notes. It is a grade, good or bad, provides no reflection. Students must receive feedback for both correct and incorrect learning. So from incorrect learning, they will understand what are the mistakes they have committed, and from them they will learn lessons and avoid those mistakes in coming future and coming assignments, let's say. But students who have done it excellently, if you give a good feedback to them, it will motivate them to perform the task with perfection always. The student who has little average feedback, that student will be more careful in the next attempts. So this is why feedback is very important. But you have to mind one thing very clearly, that timely feedback is very important. Feedback has to be very clear and it should be explanatory. You should not just give average, good, bad words as a feedback. You have to give detailed explanation why it is average, why is it good, why is it excellent. So you have to explain that. So the student will understand from that feedback and learning will happen. Self-regulatory skills. This is something might be a relief for a teacher. At the same time, it will activate the learning happening, the learning level also, and the learning consistency in the classroom. Self-regulation in students aid learning, and self-regulation skills can be taught. Self-regulation refers to a student's ability to control their emotions, behavior to the point where learning can occur. Self-regulation goes beyond mere teaching and students to follow classrooms. Students enjoy learning and perform better when they are intrinsically rather than extrinsically motivated to succeed. So, self-regulatory skills itself motivate the students to learn from within. They understand the seriousness and the importance of studies. And then you do not have to force them to keep on learning or keep consistency in the learning, finish the assignments or perform better. You don't have to go do that later on. Once students understand the importance of it, they will automatically learn it. So you may come across certain kind of students who are very late in all kind of submissions, who are very reluctant in doing class assignment, who are very passive or negative about the studies. For those kids, you can employ this particular method or self-regulatory skills. So where the role of a teacher comes? A role of a teacher comes when you can help them understand the importance of studies, importance of learning. Once this importance is understood and student becomes serious about the self growth, and learning will happen for sure. The expectancy effect. This is another interesting factor that is in teachers' hand. So teachers' expectations of their students influence their opportunities to learn, motivation and learning outcome. How? In educational psychology, the expectancy effect is well understood. Students who are instructed by teachers who believe that a student is capable of learning a task or skill or mastering a domain typically perform far better than students who are instructed by teachers who have negative expectations. So teachers' belief system also helps to aspire students towards learning. So a student has to believe in each and every student, understand the capacity and the potential of a student, and give a proper stimulus. At the same time, you have, as a teacher, to give them constant motivation. For that, teacher has to uh, keep on taking regular feedback of students' progress. At the same time, teacher also has to give regular feedback to the student about their progress. At the same time, teacher has to keep on motivating students when student slows down or hampers in their progress. Emotional well-being is very important, and this has been a key word in today's era. Emotional well-being has an impact on academic performance, learning, and development. Students face family or social challenges that teachers are not always aware about. So many of the times, what happens, some teachers uh, do very generalized understanding, become judgmental about students without knowing the background. If some child is very reluctant to the studies or always rude or impolite in classroom, that might be some behavioral issue or mental trauma related issue to that child. Why this child is very negative to all teachers, or why this child has negative attitude towards the studies, it may have certain influence, unhappy incident in that student's personal life. Might be his peers are teasing him or her, or might be somebody is creating a trouble, or might be the atmosphere environment in the family is not happy, not the ambience is not favorable, or the child may have previous bad experiences. Because from previous experiences, people try to conclude about the new upcoming experiences more. So a teacher has to understand, try to go to the of the problem, and develop this socio-emotive system in a student that will help them to perform better. Application of psychological principles. For good reason, classes in educational and developmental psychology are required for university and teacher's degree. So, as a teacher, it is your duty and it is a need altogether that you must take some basic classes of understanding learner psychology. If you are really good in it, only then you can do experiments and apply proper methods in classroom. If you are not well aware about the concepts like slow learner, advanced learner, drillings, thereafter remedial classes, then you will not understand what to do with with the kids with some special needs, and then your classroom teaching will fail or the learning will not happen. For that, it is a duty of every teacher to have a basic knowledge of psychology in that perspective. There are certain behavioral problems which are very common that all of us find and face in classroom. And how to deal with this is a very huge question. Especially these behavioral problems among the students disturb the classroom environment and our lessons too. That also disturbs the other students and their learning intensities. There might be sensory processing disorder to some child. So some child has some physical disability or some cognitive disability or cognitive limitation to understand certain concept, where you have to identify such kind of students and give them proper feed. Whatever they need, you have to tone down and simplify your concepts, simplify your learning. If needed, you can give personal classes, I mean, in the form of remedial classes, and help that child to achieve the level. There are some aggressive students. You have to understand the reasons behind the aggressiveness of the students. Sometimes, especially among the adolescent children, it's a common factor. Without any particular background causing such kind of behavior. Usually, what happens, certain background or previous experience triggers students such kind of behavior. But in adolescence, this kind of behavior is very common. So if you scold or punish that child, it will not help to rectify the mistakes of the child or to calm down that student and bring that student to normal. That will rather worsen the situation. in that phase, you can change the role of that child and change the environment of the learning environment of that child. For example, to the aggressive student altogether, you can give kind of different kind of tasks or responsibilities, so that child may have to lead a team, or you can give certain kind of different assignments to that child, so the child will become engaged, the learner will be engaged in performing certain task or certain assignment perform, and will be engaged in studies, and that may lessen the aggressiveness of the child. Inappropriate language. So, in certain cases, rather than reacting suddenly in the middle of the class, you can have one on one word in a personal space with that child alone. Because if you say something to that child in front of the class, as you have seen the development phases in the previous slide, just from the age of 3, the child start understanding what is shame and starts becoming self-conscious, reactive, saying no. This stage is developed in from the year 3 itself. So if you are dealing with a group of students who are more than 3 years older, then you have to be little conscious. If you suddenly react to them in the class, then that may hurt them and it may turn into their ego issues, and then they will behave more badly, inappropriately in class with you or with other students, and that may create a kind of turmoil in the classroom environment. There are some inattentive students. I try to have a dialogue and understand the reasons behind their inattentiveness. Might be lessons are not much appealing to them. Might be there is a lot of gap between their understanding and the kind of feed that has been given. So you can work on that. Avoiding schoolwork. You can give certain kind of motivation to that child. For example, if they are nursery going children, then you can give them badges for completion to different students who are completing the task. That may motivate other students also to finish the work in order to get that badge. But it becomes very difficult when it comes to the elder students. For them also, you can give certain kind of appreciation in kind of some bonus in the marks, or certain kind of opportunities you can make available for them. So in this way you can motivate them. Answering Arguing students and answering back, you can always have a polite word with these kids, because if you become aggressive, then situation may not work well. At the same time, if you have a polite but very firm dialogue with this kid's, situation may be solved. There are certain issues with some certain psychological issues rather with certain kids, such as stealing, anger outburst, lying, or just procrastination, always delaying in coming, delaying in assignment and all. You have to have one-on-one dialogue with these kids to understand the problem. If the and more in most of the cases, kids do not admit it, so you have to assure them for to the proper counseling, which has to be available in every educational institute. Slow learner and advanced learners, as we had discussed, you have to give different kind of feeds and bring the level of the learning of both. Class management is very important. You can create teams amongst children. You can make some team leader to the active children as team leader. At the same time, you can keep on rotating the responsibility of leading the team, the role of responsibilities, so that will give equal opportunities to all students, and that will also help them to develop the leadership skills, at the same time a team building skill among them. So a very healthy learning environment has to be built in the classroom. There are certain theories that we have to go through to understand as a base for this all kind of learner psychology and the kind of remedies a teacher can go for. For example, all of you know the famous name of Noam Chomsky, right? Noam Chomsky has came out with the theory for learning and development. You must be well aware about language acquisition process, or language acquisition device, LAD. According to Chomsky, students typically they come in interested for learning studies. Okay. And the process of education is a way of driving that defect out of their minds. But if children's normal interest is maintained or even aroused, they can do all kind of things in ways we don't understand. So what here basically Chomsky tries to say that students do have always curiosity to learn. Curiosity is the imbibed skill in human beings. It is in our genes. So learning is something that is student is always ready for. Where our responsibility comes that you have to give a proper environment, learning environment. You have to create a proper healthy learning environment for the kids, and then learning will happen. If you fail to create that, then learning will not happen, and very weird kind of things will happen which we don't understand. A teacher must apply a method of teaching that can develop curiosity among the children, those who are interested, inattentive in classrooms. Among them, you can always develop a curiosity through various experiments, thereafter activities, some kind of games, puzzles, pre-reading questions, post-reading questions. And once the interest is generated among the learners, learning will naturally happen. Teacher must keep the students engaged. Since learners come with an interest to learn, teachers must try their best to retain their interest and keep them engaged. According to the language acquisition theory of Noam Chomsky, Chomsky says that learning happens very naturally, especially in case of language. For a kid, you don't have to intentionally teach grammar. When child starts speaking, because adaptability is there in the brain, is in the genes of human being, and that is the reason behind it is the survival instinct, right? That is something we have discussed at the beginning of the session itself. So how to apply that here, the evolution phases of human being comes here. So we have to understand that survival instincts are there in the human being naturally, and that's why the brain always have adaptability. The problem solving mechanism is always there in the brain. So when a child is born and comes in the learning environment, such as family members or in a society in the larger groups, child start picking words. Okay, such as somebody tells, the elder person tells snake or dog or a sparrow or a bird, and children starts learning by mimicking or repeating words and all. And then after certain intervals, they start understanding this thing means sparrow. And then they start observing and repeating the phrases, sentences spoken by people around the child. And initially, the child starts pronouncing or articulating words or sentences in an ungrammatical way. But when we recorrect it slowly, slowly, they naturally learn the grammar. We have never taught any child the grammar rules, and then giving examples and making them solve it and apply that for to other sentences, such as we used to do in grammar translation method, right? So here Chomsky rejects that idea and he says that acquisition happens naturally. So though it is developed for the language, you can develop it for your respective subjects, and you can create such kind of natural environment through which a child can start acquiring the knowledge related to that particular field. And when you create such kind of environment, the curiosity is always created and it also generates interest among the children, and the learning happens naturally. The next theory that some of you might be aware about is of classical conditioning and operant conditioning. So Thorndike and first actually so Thorndike has Pavlov has come up with classical conditioning with the dog's experiment. When dog is given proper stimuli, a response comes. So it is also known as stimulus response theory. For example, uh, a hungry dog was kept, and when dog is hungry, dog barks, and it's a feeding time of a dog, and the Pavlov rings a bell, and the food comes in the bowl, and dog eats it. Next time, when it's a time to drop a food in the plate, the bell rings again. So repeating these things, repeating this sequence, the dog starts understanding when the bell is rung, the food is gonna come in the plate. So next time when the bell is rung, food does not come. But the dog thinks that food is going to come in the plate, and as a reaction to the hunger or reaction to the want of the food, the saliva starts in the dog's mouth. So this is what is a stimulus and response theory. So when you want certain kind of result to happen or certain kind of change to happen among children, you have to find out what kind of correct stimuli you can give, because changes are the results, or changes are caused only by the correct stimuli. If you fail as a teacher to give proper feed to the student, proper stimuli to the student, the kind of behavioral or cognitive change you want will not happen. Same in the case of Thorndike's experiment, where he experimented with the cat. When cat is put in the cage, it's cat and rat sometimes. I mean, people do have different arguments on that. But let's focus on the major conclusion of this. So it has a SOR behavior theory. This is what stimulus response and individual organism theory. So when the cat is put in the cage, cat tries to get rid of the cage, and when it touches to the bars of the cage, the cat gets shocked. So next time when the cat does that, it happens the same way, and the cat understand if she touches to the bars of the cages, then she will get a shock. But now cat is very hungry and she has to somehow get out, so she starts struggling. In that struggle, she pulls a lever which is there inside the cage, and the door is open. And then she rescues herself. Next time also, when cat is put inside, she doesn't understand first what was happened when the door was opened. Then she struggles again, and while struggling, jumping in the cage, her leg falls on the lever, and when the lever is pulled, the door again opens. Through the observation, cat learns that if you pull the lever, the door opens. So next time when she is kept in the cage, she directly pulls the lever and she rescues herself. So try to understand one basic thing from this theory is you have to give a proper stimuli to the students. At the same time, you have to let them explore and learn through the experiment. Experiential learning is very important. This fellow, Ren Descartes, has come out with something very interesting. So his overreaching goal was to assist humans in mastering and possessing nature. So Descartes held that all material bodies, including the human body, are machines that function according to mechanical principles. Descartes went on to argue that human beings can be conditioned to have specific emotional response through experience. For example, when what is a natural reaction of the body? When somebody sees some kind of fear coming from ahead, the first reaction is run away. So even if you keep a soldier, and when the soldier sees an enemy coming with the fear of death, the soldier may have to run away. That is a natural response of the body. But by making changes in the mental setup, by removing the fear factor from the mental setup, the kind of brainwash given or the kind of brain training given to the soldier, they, even after seeing the enemies, even after knowing they may die, they always fight on those fronts. Why does that happen? So through these theories, you have to understand some, especially this theory is applicable in the examination anxiety, which students often face, especially due to especially in with this Gen Z. This is a very common problem found. They have very severe examination anxiety. Here, as a teacher, you can change their brain setup, their thinking setup, emotional setup, and you can change, rewire their brain in this way that this fear factor can be removed about the examination. And they should be rather very curious, very excited to attain examination and apply their all knowledge and their all skills, and they can enjoy examination process. So it depend. So this theory helps us there. Conditioning and behavioristic, cognitive and behavioristic theory, and classical conditioning is used to learn new vocabularies, terms, and conventions, such as repetitive activities, putting verbs in different sentences. So by context, you start understanding the meaning of the word also. At the same time, algebra and chemical symbols. People may learn to feel pleasure not only when they meet the original situation causing the pleasure, but also when they see some wider context associated with it, which is thought to be possible. So their imagination skills has to be directed and shaped in such a way that they should always find positive, should always have positive attitude towards learning. This concept is important in school teaching because it helps to explain children's positive and negative feelings towards school. Feelings that may have arisen as a result of difficulties in learning specific school subjects. There, you can start working on simplifying those concepts so students may understand it. Understanding is a base for it. If they understand, they will enjoy it better. Learners provide the instrument by which a problem is solved when they respond to the operant or instrumental or conditioning. Such learning is more important in schoolwork because teachers are ultimately concerned with the eliciting new responses from their children. After early acquisition of vocabulary, terminology, and rules via stimulus learning, repetitive practice of drilling, and giving proper stimulus and response, the learner must apply this material in problem solving responses. For example, a child has learned a formula now. Now, child should be able to apply that formula in solving a mathematical problem. Both types of learning can be combined using reinforcement, for example, reward. So you can give reward as a kind of motivation. Previously, there used to be a reward and punishment technique, but punishment technique will not at all work in today's condition because we have different rules and regulations, and children's mentality, psychology is changing. You have to understand that. Taught is something interesting. Test, operate, test, exit. So Miller and his friends, other theorists, has proposed a different hypothesized behavioral sequence called TOPE in 1960. So it is test, operate, test, and exist. A goal is first planned in TOPE is sequence. Uh, then a test is performed to determine whether the goal has been met. So test has to be taken to understand if the child has learned certain theory. Then if the child is able to apply that. If it has been achieved, operations are carried out to achieve the goal. So giving the problems to solve. The test is repeated and exit occurs if the goal is met. Otherwise, the process has to be repeated. For example, you have to check if the child has learned a formula. If that major objective is achieved, then give a problem to solve where the child can apply that formula and reach the correct conclusions. If that is happened, then the test is successful and you can exit. If that does not happen, then you can go again to the test. You can go again to teaching them the formulas, making them learn, taking the first test if they have understood, then going for operation and then going for test and again exit. Social behavioral model also helps a lot in classroom learning. It helps them to learn team building skills, being a member of a team, cooperative skills, at the same time, leadership skills. So in a sociometry method, members nominate others. For example, this is my best friend. He is my family member. To produce measures of preferences and rejection in groups. Most conformity to reference groups norms has been discovered in research on how people respond to groups norms. For example, of morality and behavior. For example, to such groups as families or close friends that are most important for people. So their reaction, their behavioral pattern is very different. So if you could create a good environment in the classroom, or if you create a hierarchy pattern in the classroom for certain needs. For example, some child is leading a group of kids. If you make different groups, and then they do have a leader, then team members, and they all together go for problem solving and decision making. And it has been observed that this kind of method effectively works in risky decision makings also, and you can alter their roles to resolve the conflict. Or, for example, two children in the group may be strong headed and they want to lead the group. You can give them different opportunities where they can lead the same group. So, at the same time, they also learn being social and not introvert. They also learn being cooperative in the group, at the same time, existing themselves in the kind of environment in which they are, and that lessens the negative kind of reactions or rejections among the students, and that helps them to go for a positive learning environment. So behavioral and cognitive approaches of learning. So in order to overcome problem behavior, emotional thinking or behavioral and cognitive psychology employs principles of human learning and development as well as cognitive processing. Cognitive that deals with mental processing, behavior that deals with behavioral changes among the people. So it employs the same principle in assisting people to live a better life. So there are certain behavioral problems which have been cited out here. Basically, when we talk about behavioristic theory or approach to learning, it means giving a kind of stimuli which may cause change in the behavior of a person. For example, certain child has a, while giving a presentation, let's say communication skills, that child has a body language issue. For example, posture is not appropriate. After giving a proper feed, that how a person posture should be in a presentation, if you see the change in the next presentation of the child, where the child or the learner is bearing a proper posture, you can say that the behavioral change has happened. So behavioral changes can be observed. These are external changes which can be quickly observed by external observations. But cognitive changes are mental changes happening inside. For that, different kind of theories are given, different kind of patterns are being given. For example, certain child has examination anxiety. So if you help the child to perform certain yoga postures, do some meditative poses, help that child to rewire their brain, remove the fear factor from their brain, and think for a positive vibes, go for a positive vibes, and think in this way that examination is an enjoyable process. And he has amazing knowledge, he is skilled, and it is an opportunity for the child to employ the skills through the question paper, right? So it is an opportunity. And if next time when child is giving the examination, the child successfully removes that anxiety and successfully completes the examination, it means the cognitive changes happen. So these are certain things listed down, such as anxiety disorder, depressive disorder, personality disorder, substance abuse, health-related problems, autism spectrum disorder, violence or aggressive behavior, developmental or intellectual disabilities, academic performance, relationship performance, trauma, that can be mental or physical trauma, emotional regulation problems, stress management, problems in daily living. These are certain things where behavioristic and cognitive theory or approaches to learning helps a lot. These are certain references given, uh, which I have used for my current study. At the same time, these are certain really good these are the really good references where you can get good citation, at the same time good study material also. Thank you so much. Over to you.